أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman across the globe, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: Ali ibn Abi Talib's justice, how is it measured? What are the limits of it? What is the beginning of it? What is the end of it? Keep these questions in the back of your mind, inshallah. We'll return to it. We've been discussing and we're drawing towards a conclusion and towards an end of our conversation with respect to the personality of Ali ibn Abi Talib as embodied and as seen as a global leader, a global phenomenon, a global figure, a person whose philosophy, a person whose ethics, a person whose spirituality must be known to the world. Because the world in which we operate and live in is starving, is actually seeking and dying for that leadership which it has not seen. That is, our world has not seen a level of leadership, has not seen a level of justice, has not seen a level of sincerity after Ali ibn Abi Talib in terms of governance, in terms of leadership. And perhaps we'll not see it until the advent of Imam Sahib al Zaman, Imam Mahdi, Ajallahu Ta'ala Farajul Sharif. Therefore, when we look at the personality of Ali ibn Abi Talib, we must first understand Amir al Mu'min ourselves as best as we can, because it is clear from the Prophet's attributed tradition that there are no individuals or entities that have understood Ali ibn Abi Talib except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Holy Prophet. And therefore, we can try to understand Ali ibn Abi Talib in our limited capacity so as to establish justice on earth and help make the world a better place ultimately. Therefore, in tonight's lecture, I want to highlight a few points. I want to look at Ali ibn Abi Talib's philosophy, specifically how he explained the relationship of intellect and the importance of intellect. That if we understand intellect, that we can get very far in society. That he had such a strong relationship with intellect and such a high focus on intellect that focus, that emphasis on intellect actually shows you the methodology of Ali ibn Abi Talib. It shows you the focus of Ali ibn Abi Talib. It shows you the empathy of Ali ibn Abi Talib. It shows you all of those traits which Ali ibn Abi Talib embodied in his personality in order that other people can understand the leadership of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that they can understand how to establish justice on earth, how to establish and govern through that philosophy. And therefore, we understood that if we take what Islamic philosophy is, what Islamic ethics are, and what Islamic spirituality is, and bring that together, we see that in the best example in the life of Ali ibn Abi Talib and in the life of Rasulullah. But Ali ibn Abi Talib learned everything from Rasulullah. And therefore, the extension, the personality of Ali ibn Abi Talib is very an extension of the philosophy, an extension of the ethics, and an extension of the spirituality of the Holy Prophet. Therefore, the first level of analysis and the first point that I would like to look at in this brief moments that we have together is Ali ibn Abi Talib's relationship with intellect. How did he see intellect? And if we understand how Ali ibn Abi Talib sees intellect, we can perhaps get an understanding of how Ali ibn Abi Talib sees the world at large. Number one. Number two, what were Ali ibn Abi Talib's dealing with the people on the ground? How did Ali ibn Abi Talib treat non-Muslims as well as Muslims? So we can get an understanding into the philosophy of Ali ibn Abi Talib. You see, because somebody may come forward and say that Ali ibn Abi Talib, he's only a leader for Muslims. He's only a leader, no, only a leader for Shias. And the principle that we're getting at and we're driving at here is that Ali ibn Abi Talib is not only for Muslims, Ali ibn Abi Talib is not only for Shias, rather, Ali ibn Abi Talib is a person for humanity. This is a very important point that needs to be noted. And then finally, with respect to Ali ibn Abi Talib, what were some of the justice, the level of extent that Ali ibn Abi Talib went to implement his intellect and his justice in society, to the point that he did not even favor his own. This is an important lesson for us to lead our communities, to lead our nations, to lead our global community, and see how Ali ibn Abi Talib did it, so that we can better understand this and implement it in our lives. This is the focus for our conversation today, inshallah. The first point: how do we understand the philosophy of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Well, to understand it in its totality, to understand it fully, would be difficult, if not impossible, as I've alluded to with respect to the tradition of the Holy Prophet. But we can understand, or try to understand it within some limited capacity, so that we can actually have a world that's more fair, that's more just, that's more equitable, and has all of those things that we aspire to. The first level is understanding Amir al-Mu'mineen, understanding Ali ibn Abi Talib, understanding his relationship to justice. So, what's that first level of understanding? How did Ali ibn Abi Talib, in his own words, we're told in his sayings, dictate and say what is his relationship to intellect, to aql, to reason? And the first principle that I want to come forward with respect to this is what Amir al Mu'mineen said with respect to intellect. And the first level of analysis that Amir al Mu'mineen highlights is a person's intellect, a person's aql, a person's reason, their intellect is understood through their actions. The first level is that when you understand and you see someone's actions, you can get an insight and an understanding of their level of aql, their level of reason, their level of intellect. The first level. Is that not true in society? That when we see a society, a modern world that we live in, that may have very good attributes on one side, such as trying to strive for justice and equality at some level, but at the same time, when you look at, for example, popular culture and some other aspects of society, you begin to question the world, you begin to question society, and you begin to question the dynamics of what is good in society. For example, we may see somebody in society who is, let's take the example, wealthy. Now, we've already highlighted in previous lectures that Ali ibn Abi Talib worked very hard, and towards the end and later period of life, this Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, who earlier in his life was living in very humble means, he was not the wealthiest person. This same Ali ibn Abi Talib later in his life was one of the wealthiest people in the area, to the extent that Al-Hasan alayhi salam and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam were very wealthy in their time. But this same Amir al-Mu'mineen, he used all of his wealth in order to help other people, to free slaves, to, for example, we gave the example of where Ali ibn Abi Talib dug a well. And when you dug a well in Arabia, it was considered a huge amount of wealth, because you could use that water, because water is scarce in the desert. You could use that water in order to build orchards and build many types of forms of wealth. This Ali ibn Abi Talib gifted it away to the people. But in our modern society, it seems that many times wealth for wealth's sake only is respected. Wealth for wealth's own sake is revered. That is, somebody who is a multi-billionaire in society, whoever they may be, just on the basis of being a multi-billionaire, is considered to be someone who is elevated and superior to other people. This is the common psyche of our society, in the West in particular, but also in the East as well. As I mentioned studies earlier in my previous lectures on China and India, and how they're adopting the same models and same philosophies. But if that same philanthropist, who's a multi-billionaire, for example, begins to give their money, and many of them do, that is something that is revered. That is something that is positive. That is something that is good. Therefore, Ali ibn Abi Talib says the person is understood through their actions. Their intellect is understood through their actions. If someone, for example, is very wealthy, let's use that example again, but on the weekends, on the weekdays, they're always, for example, interested in partying or using their wealth for not the best things. They're using their wealth for extravagance. They're using their wealth for showing off. They're using their wealth for X, Y, and Z. That is something that would be questionable. Furthermore, not necessarily someone of wealth, someone who's just a run-of-the-mill average citizen in society, if that person is acting in an ignorant manner, in an unintellectual manner. How so? For example, if someone begins to bother their neighbors, for example, unnecessarily, or for example, in today's modern world, if someone, for example, should be taking precautions with respect to COVID-19, and that person is taking it lenient, they're not wearing a mask, for example, or for example, they're trying to get in closer proximity and not socially distancing themselves. Many people in our modern world were making a fun or making joke of this very serious coronavirus, and through that they ultimately not only got the virus sometimes themselves, such as basketball players, or for example in the NBA, or for example otherwise they got it or they gave it to somebody else, or sometimes both. These are actions that Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying sometimes your intellect is understood by your actions, your character. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen says, number with the respect to intellect. Now, Amir al-Mu'mineen is explaining his philosophy on how to run society, on how he looks at the world. Amir al-Mu'mineen then says, intellect is the king and characteristics are the subjects. When you go to a kingdom, you notice the king is in charge and supposed to be in charge of the society. At the same time, the people who are in the society, the citizens, those are the what Imam is saying, the characteristics. So for example, your intellect is supposed to be your king that is ruling over your life. And at the same time, the subjects are how you act in society. That at least that is how it should be in theory. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says that if the king is strong, then there is order in society. And if the king is not strong in governing, there is disorder in society. If the king is not strong in ruling, Amir al-Mu'mineen's words attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Of course, we're in a state of fasting, but a very important point to note here. Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying that the king of your life in terms of decision making, in terms of seeing the world, is intellect. And furthermore, the subjects are underneath it are those things that are your characteristics. Therefore, if the king is strong, there will be order in society. If the king is not strong, that is, intellect is not strong, there will be disorder, chaos in society. Furthermore, Amir al-Mu'mineen begins to say that with respect to desire and intellect, what is better? And this is a profound, profound statement from Amir al-Mu'mineen that needs to be taken to the world. I tell you, if Ali ibn Abi Talib's philosophy is understood by the world, you would be hard pressed to find someone who rejects it. The only people who would reject the philosophy of Ali ibn Abi Talib are those people who have an interest in keeping the status quo for themselves. Those people who have an interest in keeping the general population ignorant. Those people who thrive and try to vulture off of or use or abuse the general population, those are the only people who would be against the philosophy of Ali ibn Abi Talib. As I gave the example in previous lectures, that the policies under the reign of the second Khalifa were such to give priority, to give a higher position to certain people, a caste system, a tier system that emerged under the rule of the second Khalifa. What Rasulullah had worked 23 years to eradicate during the time of the second Khalifa was implemented once again. This is what Ali ibn Abi Talib is stating with respect to the view of the world. Only those people who want to keep the status quo will be against Ali ibn Abi Talib, no one else. Nonetheless, Ali ibn Abi Talib says with respect to intellect and desire, he says greater than desire is intellect. Why? Why does Amir al-Mu'mineen says greater than desire is intellect? Because intellect, this is the line, intellect makes you a king over your destiny. Allahu Akbar. Intellect makes you a king over your destiny, and desire makes you a slave over your destiny. Allahu Akbar. How true it is that when you have control over your intellect, when you control your intellect and you are in the driver's seat, you have control over your destiny. Your destiny controls where you're going to go. That is, your intellect controls where you will go in life. That is, you will achieve your dreams. You will achieve, for example, if someone wants to go to med school, if someone goes to law school, if someone wants to go to engineering school, if somebody wants, you have to have a plan, you have to have a strategy, you have to use your intellect to get there. But if someone is a slave to their desires, when the desire is controlled over the intellect, and over that, what happens as a result? Amir al-Mu'mineen is stating and telling us, according to this tradition that's attributed to him, that the person who follows only their desires, that person will be a slave to their destiny. That means they'll end up somewhere where they did not intend. They didn't plan to get there, but they just kept following their desires and then they ended up there. What is an example of this? You take someone who, for example, is addicted to drugs. A big epidemic in many communities, and our communities unfortunately are not immune to this. And yet we have a stigma around this topic where we don't discuss it. We should try to help those who are suffering. We should try to help assist those people. And those people who are assisting them, may Allah bless them. But we have a lot more work to do on this front. In the issue of drug abuse, on the issue of mental illness, on many other fronts, we have a lot of work to do. Amir al-Mu'mineen saying that person who succumbs to their desires, they don't end up achieving their potential. They don't end up going and getting to where they need to get to and where they want to get to. But they end up going somewhere that where the desire becomes the king. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, make your intellect the king and you will achieve your destiny, which you seek. But if you make your desire ruling, you will become a slave to your destiny. The amazing, profound words of Ali ibn Abi Talib that need to be shared with, that need to be shown to the world. Furthermore, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, if your intellect is correct, the intellect is that which uses it in order to correct it, it arrives at the correct decision through reasoning. Pay very close attention to what I'm saying from Amir al-Mu'mineen. That intellect arrives at the correct decision through reasoning, through thinking, through reflecting, through analysis. And he says it, you first of all uses it. Second, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, intellect understands that which has not yet happened through that which has already happened. How is it? It seems like it's taking place. It's a contradiction. Ali ibn Abi Talib saying, the intellect understands and arrives at what will happen by understanding that which has not already happened. How? He's saying, take lessons from the pages of history. Learn that through understanding and analyzing and using your reason and using your intellect, you can look at the pages of history to understand what was happening and what will happen in the future. Example, how? You may say, how? If you look at the trajectory of history, there are several books that have been discussed on this. From a religious perspective, such as, for example, A Course of History by Ayatollah Shamsuddin, excellent book that I recommend highly, or from a secular lens, looking at the lessons of history by Will Ariel Durant, you will notice that when you study history, as Amir al-Mu'mineen tells his son in his wasiyah, my son, study the pages of history, for it was as if I was walking amongst the ruins of the past civilizations and deriving lessons from them. He says, although Amir al-Mu'mineen's words, again attributed to him in the wasiyah that he wrote to his son, he says, although I did not live as long as some others in history or in civilizations, I learned from the lessons and I saw what brought them good and I saw what brought them harm. This Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying, learn from the pages of history. So he says, going back to intellect, he says, learn from the pages that realize that intellect is that thing that helps you understand that which has not yet happened by understanding what has already happened in the pages of history in the past. Ali ibn Abi Talib is highlighting, understand history so you can forecast, so you can analyze. Again, for all of those brothers and sisters in university and professional careers, the whole modern academia runs on statistics. There are two dimensions of statistics, at least in terms of its benefit. One is to see and analyze trends, trend analysis for the past, to see what has happened or what is happening. And the next level is what is called forecasting, which is done in econometrics and many other modern sciences that our youth study and many of our young professionals study. Econometrics, for example, forecasting, for example, looks at what has happened, looks at what is happening in order to predict, using predictive analytics, what will happen in the future. This is what modern data science is, to analyze. Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying intellect will help you understand what's going to happen before it actually happens, by understanding what has happened. This is the philosophy, the manhaj, the thoughts that Ali ibn Abi Talib is sharing, so that you and I can understand how he operates. What's his philosophy? The next level, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, highlights that intellect is different than, it has a deeper layer. What is that deeper layer? The deeper layer that Ali ibn Abi Talib highlights with respect to intellect, he says intellect is not simply hearing something and repeating it. Think about that. Stop on that for a moment. Intellect is not merely hearing something and just repeating it, regurgitating it, and just saying that, oh, I heard this, I heard this, I heard this, I heard this. No. Intellect stops, pauses, and examines. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, intellect examines. There are many, Amir al-Mu'mineen says now in this same tradition, that there are many who hear and repeat, yet the ones who examine are few. Amir al-Mu'mineen in other places attributed to have said that the solution to every one of your problems is in thoughtful, deep thinking and contemplation on the issues. Amir al-Mu'mineen saying, examine. By the way, on a side note, this is exactly what the ancient philosophers had said, by the way. Amir al-Mu'mineen, for our brothers and sisters, really think about the philosophy of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Socrates, Plato, these are philosophers said that the unexamined life is not worth living. That life that you do not do tafakkur on, tadabbur on reflection and contemplation, that life is not worth living. This was his statement. Amir al-Mu'mineen saying the same thing, but in more elegant or different terms. He's saying that reflect and examine your life, examine your world, so you get better solutions, you get better results. I say this to increase your ma'rifah. Why? Because Ali ibn Abi Talib did not have access to what those philosophers had said, huh? Even those people who say that Islam, for example, the Arabian or the Persian philosophers, they translated the works of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, that happened many years later. How does Ali ibn Abi Talib know about this? The way Amir al-Mu'mineen knows about this is because he learned only from one teacher and directly from one teacher. That was Rasul al-Azam, the Holy Prophet, the divine messenger. And when he learned, he says, Rasulullah taught me in such a way, Amir al-Mu'mineen is attributed, said that Rasulullah taught me in such a way that he opened in my mind 1,000 doors of knowledge. We say, the famous tradition, Ana Madinatul Ilm wa Aliyun Babuha, where Rasulullah says that I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Rasulullah, the Holy Prophet, opened in my mind 1,000 doors of knowledge. And from each door, another 1,000 doors emerge. This is the knowledge of Ali ibn Abi Talib. But I say this because you and I must take and must understand that Ali ibn Abi Talib is a personality for all of mankind, not just for you and I. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's the proof of this? Why am I saying this? What's the evidence? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran al-Majid wa Furqan al-Hamid, how does he begin? He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdu Lillahi Rabbil Alameen. That he is the Lord of the universes, number one. Remember, the verses that I've been reciting in the previous nights, keep that one in mind and you'll understand this. This is the first level. The second level, with respect to the Holy Prophet, there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there's the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet, he says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ مُؤْمِنِينَ عَالَمِينَ وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Allah is calling himself Rabbul Alameen. Rasul, the messenger, is Rahmatan lil-Alameen. And with respect to that, what is the verse that I've been reciting in the past few nights? يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. O you who believe, obey, obey Allah. Number one. وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ, and obey the messenger. وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. And those vested with authority amongst you. And that's very clearly Ali ibn Abi Talib. We can prove that categorically. You don't have the time and scope. Therefore, if it's Rabbul Alameen, if it's Rahmatan lil Alameen, based on this verse, Ati Allah wa Ati Rasul wa lil amri minkum, that means that the Imam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, must also be for the Alameen. Therefore, Ali ibn Abi Talib's view, his philosophy, his ethics, his spirituality must be shared with the world so that we can understand and we can absorb. Furthermore, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, intellect is true intellect, examines. It does not just hear and it does not just repeat. This is the very, very beautiful saying that I want you to understand and I want you to share with the world about Amir al-Mu'mineen saying. What does he say here? It's profound. And this requires thinking. This requires analysis. This requires really contemplating. This is not something you will get right away. You will reflect on it. When you go to bed tonight, maybe you think about it and it will hit you. Maybe when you wake up in the morning tomorrow, it will hit you. What Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying in the depth of this, he says, the first opinion, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the first opinion of the intellectual, the first opinion of the person of intellect is the last opinion of the ignorant one. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the first opinion of the intellectual is the last opinion of the ignorant. What does it mean? Really try to think about this. Really get into the layers of what Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying. In our world, there is something that is called in psychology the Dunning-Kruger effect. And this is identified within psychology. What is the Dunning-Kruger effect? The Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology highlights that as intellect increases, intellect and confidence, or confidence and competence, intellect and confidence, these two things are in opposites. As one increases, the other decreases. This is science, huh? Don't get offended at me. The Dunning-Kruger effect identifies that as intellect increases, or competence increases, or intelligence increases, confidence decreases. And as you can imagine the opposite also being true, that as one has more, for example, confidence, that they may not have as much competence. Amir al-Mu'mineen is highlighting here that the first opinion of the intellectual is the last opinion of the fool, of the person who is the ignorant individual. How many times in society you'll notice that someone says, this is exactly what we must finally do, and yet the person who's the intellectual, the thinker, is thinking, hold on a second, maybe there's another avenue, maybe there's another option. I say this to understand the philosophy of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And if you understand how Ali ibn Abi Talib is thinking, maybe not 100%, maybe 40%, maybe 30%, maybe 10%, maybe 5%, we can't even get that high. If we can understand 1% of Ali ibn Abi Talib's manhaj and school of thought and way of thinking, we can get so far in life and society. Ali ibn Abi Talib saying, reflect, think, contemplate before you get to your conclusion. Before you get to this, the first opinion of the intellectual is the last opinion. He's also saying that the person who's a fool is constantly thinking, the last thing that they get to, where the fool's intellect ends, where the fool's thinking and opinions end, is where the intellectuals begins. This is also a beautiful example to understand the position of the Imam. That where our intellect ends is where the Imam's begins. Because the Imam has ultimate ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or as close ma'rifah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as possible. So one thing that's very important is to adopt intellectual humility in our lives, that there are other options. When someone comes forward and says in our modern world that you're either with us or against us, as an example. This is in philosophy what's called, or in logic, a false dilemma. Either you're with us or you're against us. And Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying that, look at the other options, look at the other solutions, look at the other ways that you can go about it. When someone says you're either with us or against us, well, there's another option. I'm neither with you, I'm neither against you. Maybe both of you are wrong. Maybe both parties are wrong. Maybe there's a third solution. Maybe there's a fourth solution. Maybe there's many others. Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying, don't neglect the other opportunities. The same thing was seen in the manhaj of Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. How? They would always strive to first use dialogue. They would always strive to, for example, first use a peace treaty. They would always strive to find some amicable solution as much as possible. This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen is highlighting. And next, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the person of intellect, they find it better. A profound statement from Amir al-Mu'mineen. The person of intellect finds it better to live a life of hardship amongst other intellectuals than what? Than living a life of ease amongst fools. Not my words, huh? Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Asadullah al-Ghalib. Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying this, or it's attributed to him at least, that the person of intellect, the person of ilm would much rather, the person of aql, the uqala, they would much rather spend time in difficulty, in hardship amongst the intellectuals as compared to being in a life of ease amongst the fools. I say this because of in our modern world, many people would prefer the opposite. Many people would prefer to live a life of ease in the midst of fools. Many wealthy fools, for example. And I'm not saying wealth is bad. I've repeated this throughout the lecture series. I'm saying that wealth has a very important role, and to seek halal rizq is very important. But at the same time, many people want wealth just for wealth's sake. You see this in, for example, our marriages in our communities. Many fathers are trying to marry their daughters off to wealthy families only, for example. Or many, for example, fathers want their son now to, mashallah, marry into very wealthy daughter's family or girls' families, for example. But there's no focus, for example, necessarily on aql, on reason. Whereas at the same time, you will find many people in our houses in Najaf al-Ashraf, for example. You read the lives of our scholars. Some of them have lived the most difficult lives. I remember Alama Tabatabai, rahmatullahi alayh, Sahib al-Tafsir al-Mizan. His teacher told him, his advisor told him, his mentor told him, I tell you, you should go and learn mathematics, riyadiyat, in particular geometry. He said, I found the best teacher for geometry. And when I found the best teacher for geometry, he said, I only have 1 hour to teach you, and it's in the summertime, and it's right around Zuhr time. If you know Najaf, Zuhr time, summer, it's the blistering heat. Alama said, I accept. And he said, I used to walk 1.5 miles in order to get to my teacher who would teach me mathematics for an hour. He said, when I would get there, I would be drenched in sweat. There was a small well, there was a small spring of water. I would use that in order to wash myself off, and then I would go to my teacher so I did not smell in front of him. This was Alama Tabatabai. And I remember one of the scholars from the Hawza talks about his first Ramadan, Shahr Ramadan, in the holy city of Najaf, in terms of Hawza, for example, or one of the very memorable months of Shahr Ramadan. And he said that, for example, he said he was asked by his teacher that, how have you found Ramadan in the holy city of Najaf? He said, I was young and I was a student at that time. I had not grasped what it's all about, or perhaps, and I was human perhaps. He says that I complained to my teacher and I said, I've just been having some bread and some tea. He said, later I found out that my teacher was only having tea for iftar. He said, then I felt that I understood. But he preferred that because those were the people of knowledge. He preferred to be amongst the people of aql and reason rather than the people of foolishness who are in ease. Ali ibn Abi Talib highlights this principle. What is our philosophy of life? How do we see it? Is it aligned with the viewpoint of Ali ibn Abi Talib, or is it not aligned with the viewpoint of Ali ibn Abi Talib? I leave that question to you and I and our world. Ali ibn Abi Talib, we're told in his philosophy further, there's a moment in time. Understand how he implemented this. Intellect. He's inviting the other people to focus on intellect. How? He's in the city, in his city, and he sees a man who is begging in the streets. This man has become blind. He cannot see. Ali ibn Abi Talib saying, why is this man here? They said, Ya Ali, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Abul Hasan, this man is blind. He is not able to physically work. He's physically incapacitated. He's become disabled. He's a Christian man. He can't do anything else. All he's left to do is to beg. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I will not move. I will not budge. I will not leave this place until and unless we give this person money from Baytul Mal to look after his life. So, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, why? He said, we used him. We used his physical body. We used his persona. We used who he is. As long as he was alive and were able to work hard, and now he's become blind, now he's not able to physically work, we leave him to beg in the streets? This is Islam? He said, this is not Islam. That we must treat this person with justice, with fairness. Ya Ali, Ya Amir al-Mu'min, he's a Christian, he's not Muslim, he's not Shia. Does not matter. Is he not a human being? Is he not a member of our society? Remember, this is the true face of Islam that must be shown to the world, right? Amir al-Mu'mineen is showing the world what is true Islam is. Furthermore, we're told there's a moment in time where Ali ibn Abi Talib, understand the philosophy. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he has a guest over. When he has this guest over for dinner at his house, Amir al-Mu'mineen, of course, as you know, had very simple food that he ate, that he never had more than salt and barley bread and yogurt, diluted yogurt, the traditions say, that had been watered down. This is all Amir al-Mu'mineen had, and it was either salt and bread or salt and diluted yogurt. It was not all three ever before. Nonetheless, Amir al-Mu'mineen is sitting with his guest, and perhaps for the guest he had one item, maybe more perhaps. Nonetheless, at that moment in time, this man is waiting and patient, and he begins to sit, and he finally opens up for conversation with Amir al-Mu'mineen. He finally begins to have a conversation with Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, Ya Ali, Ya Abul Hasan, can I ask you a question? He says, yes, what is it? He says, I have a case. I have an issue with so and so. That person, we have a grievance and we have a dispute. And as you know, you're aware of the matter and you must know. And let me tell you about it. Let me give you some details about it. Let me tell you what's actually going on. And as you can imagine, Amir al-Mu'mineen realizes what's about to happen. And that man, sometimes when you have some dispute with someone in the community, for example, and you want to tell, we have a natural inclination that we want to tell our side of the story. For example, if two people, they break up, for example, one side wants to tell their story, the other side wants to tell their story. This was my perspective, this was their perspective. Or for example, if two people in the community have an argument, they want to find someone and say, this is what really happened, this is my perspective, they are not being honest, they're being dishonest, so on and so forth. This man begins to say, yeah, Ali, this person cheated me, he stole from me, he took my position, I want to tell you what's the real matter. Amir al-Mu'mineen stopped him right there. He said, one second. You have a grievance with someone? You have a complaint against someone? He said, yes. He says, you have a case against someone, a legal case? He said, yes. He said, I'm the judge in this case? He said, yes. He said, and you're sitting at my table? He said, yes. He said, I must apologize. Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now look, we want to be liked in society. We want to be loved in society. We want people to say that we're good people, we're nice people, we're equitable people, we're fair people. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I'm sorry, you have to leave. And yeah, Ali, I thought you had guests. You are the most ethical person, the most generous person. You have guests in your home. He said, I'm sorry, you have to leave. He said, why? He said, because Rasulullah has said, it's attributed to Rasulullah, Rasulullah has said that a judge who meets with one party, a judge that meets with one party of a case and does not meet with the other party at the same time is not being just, is not being fair, is not being accurate, is not being correct. He says, therefore, I have to ask you to leave because it is not fair to the other party. Who has this courage? Who has this audacity? Who has this capability? Who has this ability to administer such a level of justice in society that even his guest at his dinner table, he says, I'm sorry you were to leave. This was the level of philosophy, of ethics, of spirituality, of justice of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that the world needs to understand, that the world needs to hear about, that the world needs to implement, that there have been rulers like this, there have been leaders like this, that adhere to justice even if they lost face, even if, for example, people looked at them in a negative way. This was justice. Furthermore, not only this, Ali ibn Abi Talib went to the limits of justice. Why? Because he said between justice and generosity, in Nahjul Balagha, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's explaining his philosophy. Which is better, justice or generosity? They asked Ali ibn Abi Talib. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, although generosity is good, although generosity is noble, although generosity is beneficial, he says justice is greater than generosity. Why? Why, ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? I thought generosity is one of the best traits. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, if justice is implemented in society, you would no longer need generosity. If you implemented justice in society, you would no longer need to worry about generosity. Why? Generosity only needs to exist when people's rights are not being given. If someone doesn't have food on the table, if someone doesn't have clothes on their back, if people are taking other people's rights by accumulating and amassing too much wealth and not sharing it with other people, that's the only time that you need people to be generous and have generosity. If you establish justice, by the way, I remember in one of my early lectures, when I mentioned this, one of the brothers in the community didn't believe this to be a tradition. He said, how can Ali ibn Abi Talib say this? The next week he came back to me and he said, I apologize, I looked at the reference, I found in Nahjul Balagha, you're absolutely right. I found it, and I thought about it and it makes sense. That Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying that yes, at that point, if you establish justice, people won't need to be generous. And if they do, and if they are generous beyond that, it's out of their own good heart. But it's not a necessity. Today, if you do not establish justice, then you have to have generous people. And sometimes these people, some people, not all, some people take and they steal from the public and amass from the public on one side, and on the other side, they give back and say that we're very generous in terms of charity. Well, how did you get the money in the first place? I'll give you an example. In terms of the philosophy of economics, Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, the very famous economist who published his book in 1776. When he published this book, he said one of the things that should happen in society is that the middle class and the lower class should create luxury goods. And when they create luxury goods, I'm saying this so you understand the world, so you can share Ali ibn Abi Talib's view. The middle class and the lower class should create luxury goods such as luxury furniture, luxury clothes, luxury bags, so that the wealthy buy them. When the wealthy buy it, it will distribute wealth throughout the world more evenly. This was the theory. What happened in practice and reality? What happened in practice and what happened in reality is that what Adam Smith said didn't happen. And Adam Smith highlighted this as a threat. That he said that what should happen is middle class, lower class should create luxury goods. And when they create luxury goods, the wealthy should buy it. That's the theory. So wealth becomes distributed in society. What happens in reality today? The wealthy class create luxury products such as Louis Vuitton, Prada, Gucci, XYZ, fill in the blanks, and they sell it to the lower and the middle class who buy it on credit and they pay it in debt in terms of interest. And so what happens as a result of this? The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And the societal divide becomes wider and wider and wider. Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying, establish justice. Then you won't need generosity. If people give after justice is established, that's their own good and it's good for them and it's good for society. But between the two, they're both good. But better is awla, better than that is justice. Establish justice in society. It's even more valuable than generosity, as good as generosity is. And a final tradition, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he went to the limits of justice. What were the limits? His brother Aqil comes to him one day. His brother Aqil comes to him when Amir al-Mu'mineen is ruling over the Muslim empire, up and as far as Egypt to the west, and is down to Yemen in the south, and to the Levant in Damascus on the north. This dominion Ali ibn Abi Talib is ruling over. His brother Aqil visits him. When his brother Aqil visits him, at that point in time, Amir al-Mu'mineen says to Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he says, "Oh Hassan, give a gift, give something to your uncle, my brother Aqil." He gives him his cape, his cloak. Imam Hassan gives his cloak as a gift. They sit and they go on the rooftop, Imam Ali and his brother, and they begin to talk and they talk. When night falls, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Let's have dinner, let's eat." He's the ruler of the Muslim empire, the Muslim domain. He says, "Let's have something to eat." When the food is brought forth, Amir al-Mu'mineen, who never ate more than salt, some barley bread, and diluted yogurt, watered down yogurt. He has dinner with his brother. His brother says, "Ali, you are ruling over the entire Muslim world, and this is the dinner? Something a bit better?" He said, "What's wrong with this? Alhamdulillah, this is a blessing and a ni'mah from Allah. I thank Allah for the blessings." He said, "Nonetheless, it looks like," Aqil says to him, "that it looks like I should probably do what I need to do and leave from here. And I need to ask you something." He says, "My brother, what is it?" He says, "I have a debt that I need to be paid." Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "What's the debt amount?" He says, "The debt amount that I owe is 100,000 dirham." Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "That's quite a lot. That's a sizable amount." He says, "Yes, I need you to execute that money from the Baytul Mal, write a decree, and have the money from the Baytul Mal, the public treasury, from the people's money, pay for my debt. You're the ruler, you can do this." He said, "My brother Aqil, you're my brother. You have a right over me as a brother. You have a right as a brother, but how can I do this? How can I take the people's money and use that money in order to pay off your personal debt? How?" He says, "You need to do it." He says, "You know what I can do, my dear brother Aqil? At the end of the month, I will also get my amount from the Baytul Mal. At the end of the month," Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Aqil, I'll also get some money. At the end of the month, I'll get it from the Baytul Mal. When I get something, I have a right over my family has a right over me. My wife, my children, they have a right over me. I have to take some money from them. But whatever I have left over from my personal amount, I'll give to you." Aqil says, "My brother, do you remember the amount I told you? I told you the amount's 100,000. You're saying that you'll take your personal amount that you get from the Baytul Mal at the end of the month. I need the problem solved now. You want to wait till the end of the month. Number one. Number two, and once you get your amount from the Baitul Mal, you said you have to spend it on your family. Once you spend it on your family, whatever is left over, you'll give me. He said, "Ya Ali, this is a very small amount. My debt is very big. How are you saying this? I need you to issue a decree from the Baitul Mal to get me my debt paid off." Amir al-Mu'mineen realized his brother's not getting it. They were sitting on the rooftop. Amir al-Mu'mineen is attributed to have said to Aqil, he says to his brother Aqil, look down towards the market. Look down from the rooftop. He says, what is it? He says, look towards the bazaar. Look towards the market where the people have gone and closed their shops for the day. Aqil looks. He says, Aqil, do you see those boxes there at each stall, at each store, at each bazaar, merchant store? He said, yes. He says, do you notice that that's where they keep their money? He said, yes. He said, do you notice that it's locked? He said, yes. He says, let's go down. Let's go and break into those boxes and take the money from those merchants and come back and pay off your debt. Amir al-Mu'mineen, the most just of society, is saying what? Aqil says, Ya Ali, you want us to go downstairs, break into the merchants who worked hard all day, who sweated, and they worked in the bazaar? You want me to take their money and steal their money and pay off my debt? How can I do this? What's wrong with you? He says, my brother, okay. You don't accept this? You don't accept this? Fine. Let's take our swords and let's go to the nearby town where there are wealthy merchants and there are wealthy businessmen. Let's go to the nearby town. When we go to the nearby town, we'll go and we'll rob one of the wealthy merchants and take the 100,000 dirham and pay off your debt. He said, Ali, what's wrong with you? Perhaps he said, in my own words, he's saying, Abu Talib's our father. He raised us better than this. You want to go rob? You want to go steal from people? You want to take swords? And you want to do this to other people and steal money to pay off my debt? What's wrong with you? We're raised better than that. He says, my brother Aqil, you don't accept that we steal from the merchants in the bazaar. You don't accept that we go rob the neighboring town. Yet you want me to go and rob and steal from the Baitul Mal, which is the money of all of the Muslims? You don't accept that we steal from a few merchants or one or two wealthy people in the neighboring town, but you think it's acceptable to steal from all of the Muslims? He said, what happened? When did I say this? He says, when you tell me to use the money from the Baitul Mal of the people to pay for your personal debt, that's exactly what you're doing. Aqil understood, but it wasn't the easiest thing. How do you say no to your brother? Ali did. Aqil was going through a difficult time. That's why he had to come to the point of asking Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen. But Amir al-Mu'mineen went to the limit of justice. He says, that's the limit. Even my own blood brother, if he asks, I must be fair and just. This is the society that Ali ibn Abi Talib established. This is the society that Rasulullah established. And this is inshallah the society that we will know when Imam Sahib al-Zaman returns. Between these two eras, we have not seen and perhaps will never see justice of the likes of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to understand 1% of the fraction of Ali ibn Abi Talib's philosophy of running society, of Ali ibn Abi Talib's ethics of running society, of Ali ibn Abi Talib's spirituality. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to implement in our own communities the justice or a fraction of the justice of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and allow us to understand and have some ma'rifah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be the Shia or try to be the Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That Ali ibn Abi Talib who never once embarrassed us on the public stage. No, rather, other people's leaders embarrassed them at times, but Ali ibn Abi Talib is that individual that at every moment we attach ourselves to Ali ibn Abi Talib because we found no other better leader than Ali ibn Abi Talib, than Rasulullah Azam, the teacher of Ali ibn Abi Talib. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time and allow us to be his companions when he returns. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.